Welcome back to Fast Market Amounts Coffee alongside Kevin Hinks, and I'm excited for this segment. It's time for cash tags, and we're talking Peloton. So while never actually used a Peloton, and I don't even know if I've ever seen a Peloton in person, everyone else is so excited about it, Jenny, so I'm excited about it.
Yes, I always joke that this sort of has the best free marketing because everyone that has Peloton loves to talk about Peloton. It's sort of one
the
of
new CrossFit.
Exactly. It's the thing where everyone loves to tell you how much they do CrossFit. I think Peloton is sort of the same way. But I have Peloton, and I do think it is for a good reason. They are pretty unreal experiences as far as workout classes go. Plus, of course, given the fact that we were all remote and at home, it was really the perfect way to work out, feeling like you were doing a workout class while also being socially distant over the last year. So for that reason, they of course saw a crazy 2020, but then they've been under some serious selling pressure since then, plunging as much as 52% from their all-time highs of about $171 a share. So they're set to report their fourth quarter earnings today after the close. So it's sort of the spotlight earnings, I would say, of the day. But with gyms closed, of course, during the pandemic, this stock saw a surge, now seeing this degree of selling with people returning to their gyms. But I have to say that with a lot of mask mandates reinstated in certain cities like Chicago and wearing masks again to work out, a Peloton sounds like a pretty good experience right about now. So that is also something to keep in mind. But one thing that will be, I believe, a huge focus on this earnings call is actually these safety measures. Of course, this stock tumbled when they had to recall their Tread and their Tread Plus due to safety issues. Now, they recently did announce a repair, actually, that will ensure this touchscreen does not actually fall off, which to me seemed like a pretty good thing to take care of. But they also announced that this new Peloton Tread will be available in the UK, US, and Canada on August 30th, and then in Germany, actually, in the fall. So I think this is interesting because this is sort of progress they're making on this Tread, which has been a huge pain spot for the company. And I think any sort of safety issues and things they can sort of mitigate here or discuss on this call will be very positive for investors. But right now, what really they need to do is, I believe, expand outside of the U.S., or rather continue expanding outside of the U.S., because the U.S. market after this past year is saturated. So currently, they operate in Canada and the U.K. and Germany, and they have plans to expand actually to Spain and France. But I think continuing to tap these new markets, Australia is one of them, is something they need to do to continue growing. Now, they probably won't grow at the same robust levels we saw, in the last year, but to continue growing and just to sort of re-spark faith in so many investors' minds, because I think this name has sort of been hit by a lot of doom and gloom lately. But like Alex and I mentioned, is if you're loyal to Peloton, you are extremely loyal. And there are Facebook groups, there are all these almost like cult-like followings. My dad has like a group chat with Peloton friends. It is so funny to me. And that is what our first tweeter talks about today, is these Facebook groups that circulate that are all about Peloton, which says, love how Peloton leverages the 430,000 members in its Facebook group to get new featured ideas. The community aspect of Peloton is very underrated. So what this tweet actually showed was sort of this thread that was almost like a Reddit sort of themed Peloton, where people were discussing things they liked, things they didn't like. And I actually think that's really cool because this is a company that I believe at least values so much of its customers' feedback. And our next tweeter actually focuses on something I've seen personally that I think is genius for Peloton, and this tweeter agreed, so I had to show it, which says, Peloton is in more hotels than I thought. What a great advertisement for those that don't own one. For those with a Peloton already, what an awesome way to keep your streak going while you were on a vacation or a work trip. So I know people, give me at least a lot of grief for working out on vacation, but I have to say I was actually at the beginning of August at a hotel where they had 10 Pelotons and they were always full. So that just goes to show people that use them do really love them. Now, I maybe think that someone who hadn't used Peloton before might be more hesitant to get on a bike, but it is a really good way for someone to say, try one out. And I have seen this at various hotels. But Andy, I am so curious to hear about your data specifically because, this is just a name that has so much buzz on social media, and I really only found positive things, but I think I'm a little biased because I am part of this sort of cult that loves Peloton.
Yeah, the cult that loves Peloton is very real. It's very large, and it's growing. But the problem, at least in the short term, is that it's not growing as fast as it was because, like you said, Jenny, 2020 was an absolute boom for this company. There was an extraordinary amount of pull forward demand. When we look at Peloton, looking at LikeFolio data, the consumer mentions, the purchase intent mentions, it's just kind of a classic pull forward demand story. And right now we're starting to see that fall off. And one of the reasons that we're starting to see it fall off is the return to normal gyms. The slowdown in the number of people talking about working out at home is very real. So it's mostly macro conditions that boosted Peloton in terms of what they had in 2020 and over the last 12, 14 months, really. But those same macro trends are starting to turn against them a little bit. And I think the company clearly knows that and is doing everything they can to fight this uphill battle of tough comps going forward. But overall, there's definitely some short-term tough roads to hoe ahead. But what we see is this is a fantastic company that its customers absolutely love. And long-term, that tends to bode really well for companies like this. Cult following is never a bad thing to have, especially when you have a subscription-based revenue business.
Andy, you step in and tell me where I'm dead wrong here, because when I think of Peloton, I think of a mini, and you can decide which level of mini, a mini Tesla. And here's why. They have the cult following, much like the people that love Tesla people that love Peloton. But here's the other thing that kind of makes me think that it's right. What fears me if I was a doubter of this company is the pipeline, right? The pipeline would scare me if I was a bear in Peloton, because, it looks like they're coming out with a new treadmill very soon. Jenny said August 30th. I'm hearing that there's a rower in the pipeline. I heard that they just bought Precor. That's going to lead to something down the way. So this company is kind of doing all the right things, and there's, and people, Jenny and you are exactly right. This is a cult company. May not be a cult as big as Tesla, but it's still a cult. Andy, your thoughts?
No, I think you're exactly right. I think you've absolutely nailed it. The comparison to Tesla is probably spot on. This is a company that I believe has ambitions way beyond an exercise bike. They have ambitions to overall individual fitness. That you see that through their commitment to their subscription app that they have, where you can do yoga, running. They have all kinds of training that you can do on that. They're building an enormous audience, an enormous community that they're not only getting feedback from, like the tweeter Jenny shared was talking about, but they're also building an audience of people who can buy these expensive, high-margin products and then follow up with expensive subscriptions that you never quit. So the business model of Peloton is extremely sound, and they're executing on all cylinders. The only thing that concerns us is the near-term comps that they have compared to last year's absolute boom.
Andy, Kevin, I love the Tesla comparison as well, because the virality of this company, it seems to always be in the headlines, good and bad, just like Tesla. I do have to disagree with the one first tweet. I think it was saying that their customer experience is underrated and the community is underrated. I think that's the most reported on thing I've ever heard, is how this social aspect of this, and that is the differentiating factor. Not to mean that it isn't great and that's why people love this product, but underrated is, maybe I'm crazy. I just don't see that. But my question for you, Andy, is a little bit more to pick your entrepreneurial side of your brain here, because Jenny also talked about the hotels and the placement there, and I think that's a really, really smart move in the sense to take care of your existing customers, more the professional, older class who maybe does have some of that corporate travel. They're staying at hotels. They want to continue their workout on the bike, keep their routine. But what about, loaning some of these? They don't even have to give them to them. They can loan them out, still claim ownership of these bikes to every apartment building in an urban area, give 2 or 3 bikes and start slowly but surely cultivating the younger generation, getting them attached to this so that when we're older, we have a home that's big enough to put a bike in the middle of the living room, and we have the money to do so, that we actually want to do so. Is that a smart plan, and to kind of capitalize on what they already have is a brilliant marketing strategy, which is let everybody else talk about your product?
Yeah, I think it is, and I also think that they're already doing something that is a little less capital intensive through their app by allowing people to download that, get free workouts, upgrade to a relatively modest subscription if you don't have the bike. I think that probably the next thing, if I were Peloton, that I'd be thinking of is some sort of wearable device that was easily identifiable to others, so that, like a Fitbit kind of a thing. I don't know what it would actually be, but something like that that could identify these, so-called Peloton cult members to each other, and like the iPhone, like uh, earpods, and all of those things become a visible symbol and a marketing piece that moves around. Because right now, Peloton's biggest problem really is that people only see a Peloton when they go into someone else's house where they have a workout room and have this set up. So it's not as public as it could be. Hotels, good idea. Apartments, a good idea. But I think probably something I would be thinking about if I were them is, something that people can actually have on them that identifies with the Peloton movement, because I think that's what it is. I think it's an individualized exercise movement, and Peloton is clearly leading the way.
Andy, I completely agree. And I think to sort of echo that, better branding and sort of visualization for other people, I think apparel is another thing they need to sort of continue doing. I know they've started that, but I think you see people wearing the Peloton brand, and since I love Peloton, I immediately think they must be cool. So I think more and more of that. But Alex, actually, I thought you brought up something really interesting, because my sister just moved into a new apartment where they do have Pelotons actually for free. So to me, that was like the greatest deal ever. But they sort of have, I'm not really sure how that works with Peloton themselves, but they have sort of started doing that. But Andy, to go back to you, my question about Peloton is there any degree of seasonality here? Because I mean, we live in a place where the seasons are very, defined. And so I would say that people over the summer maybe aren't at gyms as much as, say, the winter, of course, when it's, negative 10 degrees outside. So is there any amount of, you see people signing up or just actually going to gyms more when it gets colder out? Because that's typically what I tend to do.
Yeah, there's definitely a seasonal element to that. And I'll tell you what, the biggest seasonal element there is the New Year's resolution season.
Right.
So as we get to the end of December and we get to the beginning of January, we start looking very closely at, consumer mentions of Peloton, of Lululemon, of Planet Fitness, of Weight Watchers. I mean, the list goes on and on. That is the biggest trigger point for these companies. And so I think Peloton probably ramping up into that season with new products, new offerings that they can have advertisements and marketing out there for in November and December as we head into that critical season.
Andy, as we wrap here, I can't help but see 14.9% year over year in new gym memberships and think, year over year, that's kind of not that good yet. And I start thinking, I'm getting all those calls from my former gym to re-sign back up. Things must not be going so well. Even with working out at home down 58%, if I went out and bought a Peloton bike for, $3,000 or something, I'm probably still using it, or it's sitting there and I'm paying for the membership nonetheless, because I don't want to admit to myself that I spent all this money and I don't use the product. So I'm assuming there's some stickiness here. They're constantly growing. The comps are going to be tough, Andy, but the stock's significantly off the highs. So when you look at this, near-term, long-term, 30-second elevator pitch, what's the thought process here as a trading vehicle?
I'm concerned near term, I think, but I would think of near term concern as long term opportunity for sure. This is one of the greatest companies in the world. They have real pricing power due to their consumer happiness and their business model. And look, this is the first company in the world to actually figure out an expensive piece of home gym equipment that people use month in and month out and are happy to do so. You've got to give a lot of credit to that. This is a company that's really changing the landscape, and I think this near-term rocky road that's probably on the way, pretty good opportunity for investors looking out multiple years.
Well said, Andy Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio.com. Thank you as always for joining us here on Fast Market.